Shalom, Boker Tov. Thursday, May 14th, some morning Torah. Once again, Rabbi Eric Solomon here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to talk about the second of the two Torah portions from this week. There's Behar and Bechukotai. In my laws, you shall walk or you shall follow. As I talked a little yesterday. And in this section, there's something called the curses, the blessings and the curses. And in fact, in synagogue, traditionally, during the reading and chanting of this Torah portion of the curses, it is done in a sotto voce, I believe in a soft voice, because the curses are quite intense and negative, obviously, maybe scary. And really the theology of that section, it has beforehand the blessings, brachot, and klalot, and the curses. It says basically, this is the theology of this section of the Torah, also comes up in Deuteronomy, which is a reward and punishment theology that says, God says, if you follow my commandments, if you do the mitzvot, then I will reward you with all kinds of blessings, many of them in the natural world in terms of the land and its beauty and bounty and food and things like this. And if in the case of if you don't follow the commandments, then there will be curses and bad things will happen to you. And it enumerates them, and they are terrible and scary, frightening and upsetting. So, this is the traditional, there's no doubt about it. 5 books of Moses, Torah view. If you follow the commandments, good things will happen to you. If you don't follow the commandments, bad things are going to happen to you. Now, that theology, as problematic as it is to me, and one would say perhaps the entire modern theological journey or contemporary theological journey has been challenging that Torah perspective, and in particular in the Jewish community after the Shoah, after the Holocaust. That theology, to me, is untenable. To think, it's theoretically, to say well, if I do good things, God reward me, do bad things. I guess in theory, it sounds possible or plausible until the rubber hits the road, in my view. Are we going to say that 1.5 million children were killed in the Holocaust as a sign of God's punishment, or that they did something wrong, like, for example, didn't keep Shabbat? So this type of theology is, it makes me want to vomit, right? It's extremely upsetting. And it is the challenge of, why do bad things happen? Why do bad things happen, particularly to good people? There's been books written about this, like Rabbi Harold Kushner. And what is the theology behind this? All right, so let me step back and say, why am I saying and emphasizing here, this is my opinion? Because the truth of the matter is, as a congregational rabbi, it's been one of my remarkable journeys over 20 years, that when I speak with my congregants about their lives and in moments of crisis or difficulty, moments of challenge, it has been shocking to me how many modern, thoughtful, deeply intellectually rich, cerebral American Jews hold on to some part of this theology somewhere. I remember sisters I met with years ago, who one of the sisters, died of cancer, young, breast cancer. And I never met the sister, sadly, who died, but I was talking to them about it in the context of a funeral of one of their parents. And they said to me, Ernest, I was shocked. They said, well, our sister died of cancer young, and we know it happened for a reason, and we know it's probably, because she didn't do certain things right in her life, and that's why God took her. It took my breath away. I don't believe that. I think they think I believe that because they know I study the Torah, and I understand why they think that. And they felt comfortable sharing that. And I feel grateful they felt comfortable sharing that. But it shocked me, because that theology is, when you put it large, is really problematic. It's like sometimes in Israel, when sadly, certain kibbutz or moshav, people die tragically of a terrorist attack, or soldiers die in a war or something, and then some rabbis come and check whether the mezuzah on the doorpost, the klaf, the parchment, is kosher, and they'll say that's the reason. Like, if you didn't have a kosher mezuzah, that's why people are dying. This type of theology, for me, is the consequence of what that means is not the kind of God I believe in. And it's written in the Torah. So where am I going with this? My point is that I've come to a place where I believe that it's okay for people, it's kosher, and certainly a Jewish take, for each individual person to make sense of their lives, particularly why they suffer. Each of us has suffering. No one gets through this life without suffering. And if the way you make sense of the suffering is the Torah's vision, like, well, I must have done something wrong because that's how God works. It's not for me to tell you, quote unquote, you're wrong, right? This is each and individual person's job and their life is to make meaning of their lives, both the happy parts, but also the challenging parts. The issue is when someone else tells me or tells my congregants what the meaning is in their suffering. This is what I want to say, right? It says in the Torah, blessings and curses. If someone wants to take that on, and by the way, I think the modern equivalent of this, I hear this a lot also, is that everything happens for a reason, which is a softer version of blessings and curses. And by the way, I appreciate it. People are trying to say, look, they're suffering in my life. I don't know why it's happening, but it happens for a reason, which behind that means God's in there somewhere. God's somehow causing it, and I yet don't discover what it is. Again, I respect that. I'm not a big fond of it. I think it's, again, if you take it to the extremist situations, it doesn't hold water with me. When you say someone died of cancer young or hit by a car or tragic or terrorist attack, because there's a reason behind that. God's in there somewhere causing that. But again, I respect that people. The issue I have is when someone is going through suffering, including myself, and someone comes to me and takes their theology, I call this theological malpractice, and tells me this is why it's happening. And this has happened to me, but it's also my congregants, where someone's suffering, they have a loss, and their theology is either not clear or they're struggling, or whatever, and they say, don't worry. The reason why this bad thing happened to you is because God is sending you a message, or God, there's a reason. Be very, very careful. Be very, very careful. That is not the most comforting thing to the vast majority of people when someone tells them why their suffering is happening. It is upon each of us in our lives to find and discern and understand where God or God is not in our suffering and what is the meaning behind our suffering and what we learn from it. And it's different, by the way, to say that I've suffered. For example, I've heard people say to me, I had cancer. I saw my life coming to an end. I was on the edge of death. And in the end, Rabbi, it was a blessing because now I appreciate life more. Okay, that's powerful. That's a personal learning. They're not saying I got cancer to appreciate life more. They're saying in the course of suffering, I've learned something. Now this, I get it. That's not saying God did this to make, God gave the Holocaust, God gave the pandemic in order for us to appreciate social closeness. It's a response, but I'm not prepared to put God in it. But come back to my main point. My main point is that it's not for us to tell other people what their suffering means. Each of us have to just find that out for ourselves. And if we decide that the Torah's model works for us, even though even as people's rabbi, may not personally agree with that, I don't tell them that they're wrong or I disagree. I mean, if they ask me questions about it, I'm happy to share my opinion, never shy. But I respect people's personal journey to understand their lives and why it happens, or why things happen, why bad things happen. And so my message here I really want to put here is that even though the Torah is putting out a model, the Torah is putting out a conversation, putting out its attempt to understand why horrible things happen in the world. And from its perspective, it's God behind the scenes, rewarding and punishing. And what I want to say to each of us is that we can take that model, we can struggle with it, but we also can put it to the side. I'm not going to spend time now giving other things. Read Rabbi Harold Kushner's book. That's, I think, one of the most phenomenal ones. But in each of us, it's our job to decide for ourselves, to work that out for ourselves, but not to push it on others. And so when you go to a house of mourning, or you go to meet someone in hospital, or someone who's struggling, or someone when there's pandemic who's really struggling with social isolation, depression, anxiety, just be very, very careful. Be humble about telling people, well, the reason you're feeling this way is I know the reason. It says because you did something wrong. Sounds like the story of Job. No, your job is to sit with people and let them find the meaning for themselves. So, B'chukotai, it has blessings as curses. I find the theology challenging, but if someone takes it on, I respect it. And I think it's important for all of us to respect each other's journey on how we're going to find meaning and understanding in our suffering. No theological malpractice. All right, Boker Tov, Shalom, a sweet, good day with blessings, please God.